My grandson, who had lived for 7 years without uttering a single sound, gazed directly into my eyes and spoke with such clarity that a shiver ran down my spine. "Grandmother, don't eat the cake that Mother left. She said it's for today." In that very instant, I understood. My own daughter-in-law intended to poison me, and my son, my own flesh and blood, was complicit. For months I had felt unwell after every meal prepared by Daria, yet it had never crossed my mind that loved ones could wish for my demise to seize my home and my fortune. They were unaware of one crucial detail. I had overheard their late-night conversations. I had seen messages carelessly left on my son's phone. I knew precisely how much of an inheritance they had calculated for themselves. Poor, foolish people. They had no idea what awaited them. Listen to my story until the very end, and then tell me which city you're from. I want to see how far this tale has traveled. On Tuesday after lunch, my son Roman called. "Mom, we need to leave urgently. I have a business trip. Daria will accompany me," he said, his words tumbling out too quickly, as if rehearsed. "Where?" I inquired. "To Kazan for work. Can you look after Matvey until Sunday?" It seemed odd. Roman had been working from home for many years, and Daria had never been eager to join him on his business ventures. But I, as always, replied, "Of course, bring him over. What's there to discuss? My whole life has been like this. Always say yes. To help, to be accommodating, to adapt, to endure." My name is Rosa Efimovna Melnikova. I am 68 years old. For the past 40 years, I have been the bedrock of this family. 15 years ago, my husband, Evgeny Pavlovich, passed away suddenly. His heart, just like that. I was left alone with Roman. He was 25 then, on the cusp of graduating from institute. I could have crumbled, sold the house, moved into a smaller apartment, and lived quietly on his pension. But I didn't. I continued working at Tamara Ivanovna's bakery. I was on my feet by 4 in the morning. Dough, heat, flour in my hair, cracked hands. Until noon, it was rolls, loaves, pastries. Until 2, the counter, the customers. Always the same. And give me one of those, too. All so my son could study without worry. I paid for his computer science tuition, his books, his semesters, his coffee with friends between classes. I never asked him for a single kopeck. I simply wanted my son to have a better life than mine. 6 years after my husband's death, Roman brought Daria home. She was beautiful, well-groomed, with a soft voice and a smile that honestly melted me. When she visited, she helped set the table, asked for recipes, and called me Mama Rosa so affectionately, as if we were kin. Once she even confided, "I grew up without a mother." Her father left when she and her sisters were small. I always dreamed of a real family. She hugged me and whispered, "You are like a mother to me." And I believed her. I opened my heart and my home to them. They married modestly. A civil registry office, then a church ceremony. I paid for the banquet for 80 guests. I bought her dress, paid for the suits, the music, the flowers, the 3-tiered cake with boiled condensed milk that she had desired since childhood. And when Roman said there was no money for their honeymoon, I dipped into my savings, the ones I had accumulated over many years, and still, it wasn't enough. Then I sold my gold earrings and necklace, gifts from my husband on our 20th anniversary, and gave them the money. They flew to Sochi. I watched them go with tearful eyes, thinking, well, at least I made my son happy in some way. At the airport, Daria embraced me and whispered, "Thank you, Mama Rosa. I will never forget how much you have done for us." The first few months were indeed peaceful. They visited on Sundays. Roman fixed what broke around the house. Daria would call just to chat. But when she became pregnant with Matvey, things changed. My 3-room house in Podolsk suddenly became the perfect option for them. "Mom, it's temporary," Roman persuaded. "Until the baby is born and we get back on our feet. Renting is expensive now. We'll save up for our own place." I agreed without hesitation. A son, a grandson on the way, and the house was indeed large for one person. They moved in within a week, brought their belongings, occupied 2 rooms, and my house immediately ceased to be mine. Daria started rearranging the kitchen for her convenience. She changed the living room furniture for better light and painted the nursery bright yellow without even asking. I remained silent. It was for the child, after all. Matvey was born on a Tuesday in November. Rain, wind, thunder, a night so fierce the windows rattled. The labor was difficult. Daria suffered for 18 hours. I sat in the corridor of the city hospital, whispering prayers, asking God to preserve both her and the baby. When Roman came out to me, pale, and said, "Mom, it's a boy, but something's not right." It felt as if the floor had given way beneath me. Matvey didn't cry, barely reacted. Doctors ran one examination after another, saying it was too early to draw conclusions, that we had to wait. We waited. A month, then another year. Matvey grew, but he didn't coo, didn't babble, didn't turn when called. At 2 years old, he hadn't said "mama" or made a single sound. Then came the specialists. And one day, we were told something that shattered me. Severe autism spectrum disorder. The prognosis was cautious. Therapy would be long. It was possible he would never speak. Daria cried for weeks. Roman walked like a ghost, shut himself in his room, and could remain silent for hours. I carried everything. I took Matvey to his sessions 3 times a week. I got up with him at night when he would bang his head against the wall, unable to sleep. I learned sign language because I desperately wanted to understand him in some way. I quit the bakery because the child couldn't be left alone, and Daria said she couldn't handle it, that her nerves were frayed. My pension was meager, barely enough for food and utilities, while Roman and Daria contributed almost nothing to the household, even though Roman earned well. I knew this because I once saw his pay stub, forgotten on the table. He earned more in a month than I did in 6 months at Tamara Ivanovna's, but they always had explanations. "Therapies are expensive, Mom. The car needs payments. Daria has nothing to wear after childbirth. She needs an update." We had debts. Though I paid almost entirely for the wedding, I didn't argue. I remained silent. I stretched my pension as far as it could go, eating buckwheat and pasta, just so they would have everything. The house that Evgeny Pavlovich and I had paid off for years felt like it belonged to someone else. Officially, it was mine, but it felt like theirs. I couldn't turn on the television after 9 because Daria said it disturbed her sleep. I couldn't invite my friends because Matvey got agitated. I couldn't cook what I wanted because Daria was on a diet and didn't want temptations. I became small, unnoticeable, a shadow in my own home. But I loved Matvey. I loved him so much I surprised myself. I sang him the quiet lullabies I used to sing to Roman. I made strawberry jelly because he ate it most calmly. I sat next to him on the floor for hours while he arranged his toy cars in neat rows. He rarely made eye contact, didn't respond, didn't call me, but I still believed, in my own way, that he felt me. And about a year ago, I noticed a change. Roman and Daria became more attentive to me. Too attentive, and somehow unnaturally so. Daria made me her chamomile tea with honey every day, saying, "Mama Rosa, you need to take care of yourself." And Roman brought me pastries every Friday asking, "Mom, how are you? Are you taking your blood pressure medication?" At first, I thought, finally, perhaps they've realized? Perhaps they appreciate me? How naive I was, because soon after these displays of concern, strange things began happening to me. For a long time, I convinced myself it was age, or fatigue, or just life. Initially, it seemed almost innocent. Daria began insisting that I drink her healthful tea every day at precisely the same time. "Mama Rosa, you need to take care of yourself," she would say, placing the cup before me. "Chamomile, honey, a few herbs. It's good for you." Roman would nod beside her, as if he were a doctor. "Mom, don't argue, drink up. You're the only one we have." And I drank, because, well, what else? My daughter-in-law was trying, my son was concerned, and honestly, I still wanted to believe that my life hadn't been lived in vain, that I hadn't given everything for nothing, that at least in my old age I would be respected. But after this tea, a strange feeling would begin. First, a pulling sensation under my sternum, then nausea, as if everything inside me was churning. My head would feel foggy, my legs alien. I might be sitting on a stool and suddenly realize I was about to fall if I stood up. I attributed it to age, to stress, to exhaustion. A couple of weeks later, it worsened. My stomach started cramping after lunch, especially if Daria had cooked. Whether it was cutlets, soup, or some healthy salads, they made me feel as if I had eaten stones instead of food. I went to the doctor, had blood tests, and they checked everything they could for someone my age. They told me, "Your tests are within normal limits. Your blood pressure fluctuates a bit, but that's common. Try to worry less and rest more." I almost laughed out loud in the examination room. Rest? When there's a child in the house? When he doesn't sleep at night? When you're handling everything? What rest? But I nodded, returned home, and there it was again. The tea. The lump in my stomach. One day I felt so ill that I couldn't even swallow water. I was trembling. My face was burning. My hands were cold. Roman, alarmed, rushed me to the emergency room. Daria feigned concern the entire way. "My God, Mama Rosa, hold on," she whispered, stroking my hand. I was admitted to the hospital overnight. IV fluids, injections, observation. The doctor said, "It appears to be poisoning, food-related, but you came in too late. It's difficult to say for sure." Daria gasped. Roman was close to tears. "Mom, don't leave us," he said, sitting by my bedside. "You're all I have." And I, lying under the white sheet, looked at him and thought, here it is, finally. He understands. He's scared. Maybe something has clicked in his head? How blind I had been. When I was discharged, Daria became even more affectionate. She prepared broth, brought me water, administered my medication herself. "I'll take care of you, Mama Rosa," she would say sweetly. "You are our own." And I thanked her again. I said thank you, as always, until one night I woke up with such a sharp pain in my back that I couldn't lie down. I got up and went to the kitchen for water. The clock on my phone showed almost midnight. The house was quiet, dark. Matvey was asleep. I tiptoed so as not to wake anyone, and then I heard voices from Roman and Daria's room. The door was not fully closed. A strip of light lay on the floor. I stopped. I don't know why. It was just that her tone was unlike anything I had heard from her before. Sharp, angry. "It's been months. She's still not dying," she said. "Are you sure the dose is sufficient?" It was as if my heart had skipped a beat. Roman replied quietly but confidently, as if he weren't speaking about a living person but a broken faucet. "They told me it should be like this, slow but steady to look natural. If it's too much at once, they'll suspect something." I clutched the wall with my fingers to keep from falling. Daria continued, and each word was like a cut. "I'm tired of waiting, Roma. The house is worth over 12 million, plus her savings, plus her pension from your father. We could sell everything and move to Krasnodar, like we've wanted for so long. Get Matvey into a proper center, not these free sessions that are useless." "Be patient," Roman said. "She's weaker now. With her age, no one would be surprised if her heart... I've thought of everything." Daria snorted, and my insides clenched. "You've thought of everything? What about the paperwork?" "Paperwork, too," he replied. "I've already arranged it. Last week I took her to sign the will. Remember? She signed everything required." "Did she read it?" "Are you kidding me?" Roman even chuckled. "I told her, 'Mom, we're just tidying up so there won't be any problems later.' She didn't even bother to look. She signed where I showed her. She trusts me completely. Poor old woman." I stood there, unable to breathe. Poor old woman, that was about me, the woman who gave him life, who raised him when he was nobody, who preserved the house, who gave him a wedding, who took them in under her roof. So, all that's left is to wait, Daria said. Yes, Roman replied. It's only a matter of time. My head began to spin. It was as if I stopped hearing the refrigerator hum, the water dripping in the sink. I heard only those two voices, calm, businesslike, as if they were discussing buying a wardrobe, not my death. I took a step back, then another, very slowly, so as not to creak the floorboards, and went upstairs. Each step felt enormous. My legs trembled so much that I feared I would collapse right on the stairs. I reached my room, closed the door with a bolt, and sat on the bed. At first, a terrible, sticky weakness washed over me. I wanted to lie down and disappear. I wanted all of this to be a bad dream. And then something shifted within me. Not tears, not self-pity, but cold. I thought of Evgeny Pavlovich, of his calloused hands, of how he had built this house brick by brick, of how I had woken up at 4 a.m. to knead dough so Roman could have a better life. And these two had decided that I was simply a matter of time. I wiped my face with my sleeve and told myself quietly, almost a whisper, no, I won't leave like this. If they think I'll sit here and wait to be finished off with tea or soup, then they don't know me at all. And that night, for the first time in many years, I felt not fear, but anger. A calm, precise anger, the kind that no longer brings tears, but action. And in the morning, I had to go down to the kitchen and smile at Daria, as if I had heard nothing. But inside, I already had a different plan. In the morning, I went down to the kitchen as if nothing had happened. Daria was already at the stove, fussing around, acting as if she had been the mistress of the house since birth. She saw me, and immediately her smile appeared, her voice honeyed. "Good morning, Mama Rosa. How are you today? I made you some tea, chamomile with honey, just what you need." She placed the cup before me so carefully, as if it were a gift, and my insides tightened because I already knew that it was in such gifts that the path to the next world was paved. I took the cup, smiled back, and said calmly, "Thank you, dear. You are such a clever girl." Daria beamed. It was important to her to see that I was still in her hands. I pretended to take a sip, and then when she turned to Matvey, I poured the tea into the sink and immediately filled the cup with hot water from the tap. I placed it back, took a sip in front of her, and even licked my lips. "It's delicious today," I said, and added, as if casually, "It went down smoothly." Daria nodded with satisfaction, like someone who had done everything correctly, and I sat there, thinking, smoothly, yes, but not into me. From that day on, I had my own routine. I didn't call it a plan because a plan is when you're sure you'll win. And for now, I was just holding on to life. I stopped eating what Daria prepared. Not abruptly, not with a scandal, but in a way that looked natural. The doctor said, "Your blood pressure," I would say. Diet, small portions, and simple food. I ate only what I cooked myself, and only what I could see with my own eyes, or what was in sealed packages that I opened personally. I bought bread from the nearby shop and refused to let her bake it myself. It's healthier for you, isn't it? I poured my own water and made my own tea. Daria initially tried to pressure me with kindness. "Oh, Mama Rosa, I'm doing this from the heart," she would sigh. Then she started to get annoyed. "Don't you trust me?" she'd say with feigned offense, and I would smile and reply as if it were a trivial matter. "Of course I trust you, it's just that my body has become rather temperamental." The most important thing was not to let them know that I knew everything. I became more attentive than ever, not to their words, but to the little things. How Daria held her spoon when stirring honey, how Roman looked when I went up the stairs, how they exchanged glances if I said I felt well, and then one day I went through the trash. Yes, it sounds disgusting, but when your life is on the line, you stop being squeamish. I just waited for the moment when Daria would go for a shower and Roman would step outside to take a phone call. I quickly took out the bag and began carefully sorting through the top layer, and I found a small plastic vial like one from a hardware store. The label was smudged, but I clearly read the word, "For rodents, rat poison." I didn't pick it up with my bare hands. I pulled the bag over my hand like a glove, placed the vial in another bag, tied it, and carried it to my room. I hid it in a box under my linens. The first piece of evidence. It felt real. Then there was the phone. Roman, as always, lived as if the world were created for him. He would leave his keys on the dresser, documents on the armchair, his phone, anywhere. And once, he left it on the living room table while he went to the bathroom. He didn't set a password. He saw no threat in me at all. I was old to him, convenient, predictable. I couldn't deceive him. I couldn't outsmart him. I could only remain silent and wait to be discreetly written off. I picked up the phone, and my hands trembled so much that I was afraid of pressing the wrong button. But I forced myself to breathe evenly, like in the old days when I had to carry a hot baking sheet to the bakery without dropping it. The correspondence with Daria was so chilling that I felt a cold dread. There wasn't a single mom in it. It said, "We need to speed things up. She hasn't reacted again. If she keeps delaying, we'll find another way." Further on, an unfamiliar number. A man. Short, business-like answers. They asked about the agent and dosage, as if ordering paint for a fence. He wrote that large quantities at once would be suspicious, but small amounts would appear as a natural decline. I scrolled and thought, so this isn't just their fantasy. They had prepared, they had consulted. Then I saw photos, scans of documents for houses, valuations from real estate agents, screenshots of listings, houses, plots of land, cottages in Krasnodar, prices, districts. I felt like I was going to scream, but I didn't. I took out my own phone and started photographing everything, every dialogue, every picture, every line, slowly, clearly, so the dates and numbers were visible. Then I put everything back as it was and returned the phone to the table, in the exact same spot. And when Roman came out of the bathroom and asked, "Mom, have you seen my phone?" I didn't even flinch. "No, son, I think it was on the table." He took it and went about his business in the house, not even looking at me. This was their confidence. They had already mentally buried me. At night, when the house grew quiet, I took out an old shoebox. It had been on the top shelf of my wardrobe since Evgeny Pavlovich was alive. Inside were documents that I had always kept, just in case. And there, I remembered something that in ordinary life I would have long forgotten. Insurance. Evgeny Pavlovich had taken it out many years ago when we were just starting to build a normal life. He paid the premiums, then he died, and I automatically continued paying because the withdrawals came from my card. At the time, I just didn't close it, thinking, let it be. So, 15 years passed. The sum in it was so large that for a second, I didn't believe it myself. 6 million rubles. I sat on the bed looking at the paper as if it weren't about me. Roman didn't know about this. I hadn't told him. It seemed unnecessary. But it turned out that these unnecessary things are what save you. Then there was the land. My father died 10 years ago and left me a piece of land in Crimea. A small plot, but in a good location. I had never been there, always postponing it. It was far, troublesome, and my life was here. But the prices there, as I discovered from the documents and old letters, were now entirely different. This plot of land was worth money, and quite a bit. And one more thing surfaced. 5 years ago, my friend Raisa Petrovna invited me to invest in a small cosmetics trading business. I gave her 150,000 rubles then, honestly not from a place of abundance, but because I wanted to believe that I could still do something. The business prospered, they opened several outlets, and Raisa transferred my share to a separate account every month, which I had opened myself after Roman's wedding. Roman had no access to this account, and he didn't know about it. About 1,200,000 had accumulated there. I put it all together in my mind: the house, the insurance, the land, the account. It turned out that I wasn't just an old woman living on a single pension, as they had convinced themselves. I had my own reserves, and most importantly, they didn't know about them. It was then that for the first time during these days, I felt not only fear, but also confidence. Because when someone wants to kill you for an inheritance, the most important thing is that they have no access to it. The next day, I called Albert Semyonovich. He had helped us with the house documents some time ago. An old lawyer, almost 80, but his mind was sharp, his gaze keen. He works in a small office downtown, smelling of paper and old wood. I drove to his office and said directly, "Albert Semyonovich, they want to kill me." He didn't grasp it at first. "Rosa Efimovna, what are you talking about?" Then I showed him the screenshots of their messages, recounted our late-night conversation, and placed the packet containing the rat poison vial on the table. He removed his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and quietly stated, "This is extremely serious. We need to involve the police, immediately." I shook my head. "Not yet. First, ensure they get nothing, even if something happens to me. I need time." He gazed at me for a long while, like someone who had just emerged from a blaze but was still standing. "Very well," he conceded. "Then we act swiftly." We drew up a new, legitimate will, one not marked with that initial scribble. It clearly stipulated the estate to a charitable foundation for children, including those with developmental challenges, and a portion regarding Matvey, to be managed by guardians and legal counsel. Nothing for Roman. And then we did the most crucial thing. Albert Semyonovich drafted the documents so that any sudden demise of mine would automatically trigger an investigation into the circumstances. He explained it in plain terms. You must leave a trail that cannot be erased. I penned a detailed statement. Who, what, when, what was said, what proof existed. I attached copies of messages, photos, everything I possessed, all meticulously organized and prepared to be placed where it belonged at the opportune moment. As for the will Roman had forced me to sign earlier, Albert Semyonovich retrieved it and quickly identified a flaw I hadn't even considered. "There's a violation here," he announced, "and the notary is no notary at all, just someone without authorization. That document will be invalid." I sat and listened, a fever burning within me. So Roman hadn't merely intended to kill me, he had been meticulously paving a clear path for himself. After meeting with the lawyer, I went to the bank, opened new accounts elsewhere, transferred my funds, changed all beneficiaries, rented a safe deposit box, and placed copies of the evidence and a dispassionate, factual letter inside. I entrusted one key to Albert Semyonovich, the other to Raisa Petrovna. I simply told her, "If anything happens to me, don't hesitate. Open it immediately." She paled but nodded. She knew me well enough to understand I wouldn't joke about such matters. I returned home a different person. On the outside, still the same quiet, accommodating Rosa Efimovna. "Mom, of course, Dasha, thank you." But inside, I felt a steely resolve, coiled tight. That evening, Daria brought me tea again. "Drink this, Mama Rosa. You need your strength." I smiled, took the cup, and thought, keep your strength to yourself. I now understood how you lived and how you lied. While Daria was distracted by Matvey, I once again poured the contents into the sink. Later that night, as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard them whispering in their room, voices laced with irritation and malice. And then Daria uttered the phrase that made my eyes fly open in the darkness. "Roma." She seemed stronger. "This shouldn't be happening. It's time to change our approach." Their nocturnal whispers became my clock. By day, smiles and sweet words. "Mama Rosa, you should rest." By night, hushed tones, anger, and calculation. I lay in my room, the light off, and listened, breathing softly as I had learned in my youth when someone was sleeping in the house. And you need to go to the kitchen without creaking a floorboard. Daria's voice was strained, as if she were clenching her teeth. Roma, she's become tougher. You said it would be soon. I see it too, Roman replied, but she seems to have stopped drinking it all. Maybe she's discarding it or eating something else. Then we need a different plan, Daria stated. I can't take this anymore. She makes me sick. I see her face every day and wonder when it will all be over. Roman was silent for a moment, then said quietly, as if discussing the weather, There are options. The main thing is that it looks like an accident. Daria immediately perked up, and it was precisely that, the swiftness of her renewed interest, that chilled me. An accident, she mused. For instance, Roman sighed, you understand. She's old. The stairs are steep. She could slip, hit her head, and that would be it. My blood drained from my face. I clenched my hand under the covers, desperate not to cry out. Daria, as if discussing which pot to buy, added calmly, We could help her slip. Just a little. We don't even need to get our hands dirty. Make it slick. That's all. I lay there, staring into the darkness, my mind consumed by one thought. I was now in danger even just walking around the house. From that moment on, I descended the stairs as if traversing ice. I always turned on the lights beforehand. I gripped the banister so tightly my knuckles turned white. I moved slowly, deliberately, even when Matvey cried or Daria called. A couple of days later, I witnessed what confirmed my fears. They had already begun. The morning was ordinary. Daria bustled about the kitchen as usual. Roman sat with his laptop, pretending to work. Matvey arranged his toy cars in neat rows in the living room. I went upstairs for fresh towels, and upon my return, noticed a strange sheen on the first few steps, as if someone had smeared them with something greasy. I bent down, ran my finger along the edge of a step, and immediately pulled my hand back. It wasn't a drop of oil, but smeared, designed to make a footslide. My heart hammered so hard I was momentarily deafened, but I didn't panic or create a scene. I did what I had been doing all along. I composed myself, grabbed a paper towel, carefully wiped the steps, folded the soiled towels into a tight packet, sealed it, and took it to my room, to the same place where the poison vial already lay. Another piece of evidence, another step they had taken against me. The more I understood, the more I realized that if I faltered, if I showed fear, they would accelerate their plans. They wanted a weak old woman who complained, drank her tea for health, and expressed gratitude. So, outwardly, that's precisely what I remained. In the evening, Daria asked, leaning too close, Mama Rosa, you seem rather pensive today. Is everything all right? I managed a perfectly measured smile. Oh no, dear, just a bit of back pain. Age, you know. Can I help you up? Her voice was solicitous, but her eyes were cold. Thank you. I can manage, I replied, adding to put her at ease. Don't worry, I'm still quite strong. Daria turned away, but I saw her cheek twitch. My resilience irked her. A day later, Roman called me while he was in the kitchen, even though he could have spoken to me directly. That was odd, too. He stood a few feet away but acted as if the phone were more convenient. Mom, he said in a businesslike tone, we have an urgent business trip. Daria and I are going to Kazan. Together? I asked. Together, he confirmed quickly. For the weekend. Will you stay with Matvey? I was silent for a second, not out of hesitation, but listening to my own heart. It beat steadily, without panic. I already knew that every offer they made was a trap, and if they were inviting me into a trap, it meant there would be something new. Of course I will, I said calmly. I'll stay. Daria approached and interjected, though she had heard everything. I'll prepare everything for you in advance, Mama Rosa, so you won't be tired. She paused, as if bestowing a gift. I baked a cake. Chocolate. Your favorite. My favorite? I echoed, my throat suddenly dry. I had never particularly cared for chocolate cake, but arguing was out of the question. "Yes," Daria smiled wider. "It's in the sideboard. Just please don't eat it right away. Not now. Tonight, after Matvey is asleep, so you can have a quiet moment of pleasure for yourself," Roman added, looking at me as if testing my belief. "Mom, please eat. You need to find some joy sometimes. We'll be back Sunday night." I nodded. "All right," I said. "I'll have it tonight." I smiled as I had for all these years, softly, trustingly, like the accommodating mother they expected. Inside, I was ironclad. Friday arrived quickly. They packed calmly without a rush, as if going on vacation. They were leaving a gift in the house that could kill someone. Daria flitted from room to room, packing, checking her makeup bag, while Roman exchanged jokes with her. Matvey was quiet all day, sitting on the floor, arranging his cars like toy soldiers. Before leaving, Daria reminded me once more, "Mama Rosa, don't forget the cake this evening and have a generous slice. You need to build up your strength." "Of course," I replied. "I won't forget." Roman hugged me at the threshold. He hugged me tightly, perhaps too tightly, and I understood he wasn't hugging me out of affection. He was hugging me like he was sealing a finality. "Mom, if anything comes up, call," he said. "All right, son." They left. The door closed. The car drove away. I was alone in the hallway. I stood there for a long time, gazing at the empty space where my family had just been, and in place of tears, a profound weariness welled up within me, the heavy adult fatigue of someone who had understood too much, too late. Then I turned and walked directly to the sideboard. The cake was indeed beautiful. Glossy chocolate topped with strawberries, delicate swirls of cream, festive, like a greeting card. And that made it even more terrifying because their malice was always wrapped in a pretty package. I didn't touch it with my hands. I got a plate, slid the cake onto it, carried it to the kitchen table, and took out a knife. Matvey was in the living room, not even looking up. I could hear the soft click of his toy car wheels on the floor. I glanced at the clock. It wasn't evening yet, but I wasn't going to wait for evening. I needed to do what Albert Semyonovich had advised, leave a trail. This cake would become evidence, not my final meal. I took out a clean plastic bag and a small container. I had one like it for grains. I intended to cut a small piece, seal it, and then take it for analysis to do things properly. And at that moment, I heard footsteps. Not Daria's heavy adult tread, nor Roman's quick steps, but small, childish, yet confident steps, as if someone knew exactly where they were going. I turned. Matvey stood in the kitchen doorway. His eyes were averted, not looking past me, not lost in his usual solitary world. He was looking directly at me, so intently that my hands grew cold. I crouched down slightly to be at his level. "Matvey, what is it, sunshine?" He took a step closer, another, and for the first time in all these years, I saw not emptiness or an unfamiliar tension on his face, but a kind of adult, heavy seriousness that no child should possess. He opened his mouth. I froze, knife in hand, not even daring to breathe. The kitchen became so quiet I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. Matvey opened his mouth, and in that first second, I honestly thought I had imagined it, that I was starting to hear things due to exhaustion. 7 years without a sound, not mama, not a whisper. And here he stood, looking directly into my eyes, speaking calmly, evenly, like an adult. "Grandma, don't eat the cake Mom left. She said it's for tonight." The knife in my hand felt as heavy as iron. I placed it on the table to keep it from trembling and dropping. My heart hammered so hard I felt it in my throat. "Matvey," I breathed, "did you just speak?" He nodded, his gaze unwavering, and that made me even more frightened because there was something in his expression that no child should have, as if he had seen too much and held it inside for too long. I knelt down to be at his level and whispered, "Son, can you talk?" "Yes," he said. "I always could." I didn't immediately grasp the meaning. The words seemed to bypass my brain. Always could. What did that mean? Then why? Why were you silent? I asked, my voice cracking. Matvey swallowed, and I saw his shoulders tense, as if bracing for a blow. Mom and Dad said I shouldn't. If I talked, they would get angry. They said then they wouldn't get money anymore because I was sick, and they wouldn't be allowed to live here. He paused for a second and added quietly, "They said, if you tell anyone, they'll lock you in a dark room forever." Everything inside me shattered. Not just me. They had been holding a child captive with fear, their own child. I reached out to him, very gently like one would approach a skittish kitten, and embraced him. "Matvey, sunshine," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "You're not alone anymore. Do you hear? Grandma is here." He pressed himself against me and suddenly said, "Just simple. No theatrics. You're kind. You don't hit me." It was as if I had been scalded with boiling water. I pulled back an inch to see his face. "Were you hit?" He nodded. "Mom, sometimes Dad shouts when I don't do what they want, when I say something by accident." He abruptly fell silent as if recalling something unpleasant. Then he continued, "I hear them talking at night. They think I'm asleep. They said you had to leave so the house would be theirs. And then they would leave." I looked at him, unable to believe these words were coming from my grandson, a child everyone considered lost in his own world. "And the cake? How do you know about the cake?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Matvey looked up at the table, at the beautiful chocolate icing, and said, "I saw. Mom was in the kitchen last night. She thought I was asleep. She was crushing pills and putting them in it. And," he hesitated and added, "it doesn't taste good. It's bitter." I sniffed it. I hugged him so tightly that I scared myself with my own strength. You saved me," I whispered. "Do you understand that?" He sighed, a deep adult sigh. "I didn't want you to die. I'm happy when you don't drink your tea. I see you pour it out when Mom isn't looking." My legs turned to jelly. So all this time, he had seen, understood, and silently protected me in his own way. I wiped my tears with my sleeve and spoke in a different voice now, quiet but firm. "Matvey, listen to me carefully. We are going to make it so you never have to be afraid again. Ever." He looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he seemed to believe an adult completely. I didn't delay. I took out my phone and dialed Albert Semyonovich right in front of him. "Hello, Rosa Efimovna." He answered quickly, as if sensing something. "Albert Semyonovich," I said, forcing myself to speak evenly. "Matvey has started talking. He confirmed the cake is poisoned and said his parents forced him to stay silent for financial gain, threatening him." A silence fell on the other end of the line. "That's it," he finally said. "This isn't preparation anymore. This is happening now. Call the police, and we need witnesses. Urgently." I understood. I dialed Raisa Petrovna. She answered immediately. Her voice was sleepy, but as soon as she heard me, she woke instantly. "Rosa, what happened?" "Raisa," I said, "come here right now and bring Marat. I need both of you. It's important." She didn't ask 100 questions, only asked, "Are you alive?" "For now, yes," I replied, "and I intend to stay that way." 40 minutes later, they were at my place. Raisa Petrovna, pale, bag in hand. Marat, solid, composed, clearly someone who could maintain his composure. I led them to the kitchen, showed them the cake, the packet with the poison vial, the bag with the napkins I used to wipe the oil from the steps, and on my phone, the messages and photos. Raisa pressed a hand to her mouth. "My God, Rosa." Marat looked at me and asked calmly, "Matvey, are you ready to talk?" I sat down next to Matvey and said, "Son, this is Raisa Petrovna, remember? Grandma's friend, and this is Marat. He's a good man. Can you tell them what you told me?" Matvey hesitated for a second, then nodded, and he recounted it all, without faltering, without hysteria, how he was taught not to react, how they forbade him to speak, how they threatened him with the dark room, how his mother put something in his tea and said, "Grandma must drink it," how he heard the words house and money when she... Raisa wept softly into her hands, trying not to frighten the child. Marat, not hiding it, took out his phone. "Matvey, may I record this? It's necessary for the adults to believe you and for you to be protected." "Yes," Matvey said, "just not so Mom finds out now." "She will find out later," Marat replied, "when she can no longer do you any harm." After that, I dialed 112. 2 police cars arrived quickly. The senior officer introduced himself as Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev. I showed them everything: the messages, the vial, the packets, the cake. One of the officers carefully packaged the cake as if it were an explosive device, because for me it was an explosive, albeit a silent one. The lieutenant colonel listened to Matvey, asked questions calmly without pressure, as if speaking to an intelligent adult, not a child. Then he took me aside and said in a low voice, "Rosa Efimovna, there are several charges here: attempted murder, fraud for payments, child abuse. But we need to handle this so they don't suspect and run. Do you understand?" I nodded, my lips even feeling numb. "They're returning Sunday night," he specified. "That's what they said." "Then here's what we'll do," Grigoriev said. "You'll behave as usual, calmly. No hints. We'll be nearby. When they enter, we'll take them." I swallowed a lump. "And Matvey?" "Matvey will be under supervision," he replied. "And most importantly, no independent action today or tomorrow. Don't argue, don't provoke, don't expose them. They need you alive right now, so they'll be confident when they arrive." I glanced at the cake on the table. Beautiful, festive, deadly, and felt a chill run down my spine again. As if on cue, my phone vibrated. A message from Daria. "Mama Rosa, don't forget. Cake this evening and a big slice. You deserve it." I looked up at Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev. "See?" I said quietly. He looked at the screen and replied curtly, "I see. Sunday will show how confident they are in their victory." And I stood there, phone in hand, realizing there are still 2 days until Sunday, and I have to live these 2 days so they suspect nothing. After Daria's message, it became even clearer. They expected me to do everything as prescribed, quietly, without questions, and to disappear in a way that no one would pry. Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev reiterated everything calmly, without pressure, but in a way that made me remember every word. Until Sunday, you simply live as usual. No sudden moves. Answer calls evenly. If they ask about the cake, don't argue, don't justify yourself. Be brief and neutral. Matvey will be under surveillance the entire time. We'll be in touch. I nodded, my gaze fixed on Matvey, thinking, the worst has already happened when he finally spoke. Yet I was still scared, because now I knew not only about myself, I knew what they had done to a child. Raisa Petrovna stayed by Matvey's side that evening. She tried not to cry in front of him, but her hands trembled. Marat was composed, handled everything correctly, took down his statement, clarified details, and asked Matvey where and when he was threatened, where he was locked up, how he understood he had to remain silent. Matvey answered calmly, and that was the most painful part. Not childish babbling, but as if he had long ago sorted everything out and was simply waiting for the moment he would finally be believed. The night from Friday to Saturday was the first in months that I hadn't feared being given something in my sleep, yet I still barely slept. I listened to every rustle, even though the house was empty, just us and the child. In the morning, I woke to Matvey's quiet voice. "Grandma, can I come to the kitchen with you?" I didn't even immediately realize he was addressing me so simply with words. We had previously communicated through gestures, glances, assumptions, and now here was a request like any ordinary child. "Of course, sunshine. Let's go." I set out porridge, made him tea, and we sat together. He ate neatly, without fuss, and occasionally looked at me as if checking, am I really not going anywhere? Will I really not be frightened by his voice? May, I said quietly, you can tell me anything. I won't give you to anyone. He nodded and suddenly asked, are Mom and Dad coming? I didn't lie. No, lying to a child after all this would be the vilest thing. They are coming, I answered, on Sunday, but don't be afraid. When they arrive, there will be adults here who won't let them touch you. He thought for a moment, and then, very grown up, asked, will they be taken away? Yes, I said, they will be taken away, because this is not allowed. He was silent for a moment, and then exhaled quietly, as if releasing air he had held in for years. On Saturday afternoon, Marat arrived, checked on us, and said that Matvey would need to be examined by specialists, not for examination, but to officially document the abuse, and that the child was not the severely challenged case they portrayed him to be. I saw Matvey tense up at the word doctors, and immediately put my arm around his shoulders. We'll be together, I told him. You won't go anywhere alone. We'll do it all together. Raisa Petrovna later took me aside. Rosa, she whispered, you're holding up, but I can see you're shaking inside. I'm holding up not for myself, I replied. For him. I had been accommodating for so many years. Now I would be right. The same day, Roman called. His voice was calm, even cheerful, as if they were genuinely away on a business trip, as if they hadn't left a present at the house. Mom, how are you two? Matvey, is everything all right? Everything's fine, I replied evenly. Silence. A pause. Then he asked, almost casually, have you tried the cake? I felt a tightening in my chest, but my voice didn't waver. Not yet, I answered. I feel like something sweet in the afternoon. Maybe in the evening. Well, you should try it, he said gently. Daria put a lot of effort into it. All right, son, I said. Don't worry. I hung up and sat for a few seconds, just staring at the wall. That was it. Not even asking how I was feeling. No, Mom, blood pressure. They were concerned about the cake. On Saturday evening, Matvey suddenly asked, Grandma, can I show you something? He went to his room and pulled out a thin notebook and a few books from under the mattress. Not children's picture books, but proper books with text. The notebook was filled with neat handwriting, not perfect, childish, but legible. I was hiding them, he said. If they saw me reading and writing, they would have gotten angry. I opened the notebook and my throat tightened. It contained simple records of what he ate, what he heard, which days were bad, when he was locked up. And in one place, it read, Grandma is kind, only she can be trusted. I sat on the edge of the bed and held the notebook to my chest as if it were alive. You're a clever boy, Matvey, I said. You're very strong. You don't need to hide anything anymore. This is your home now. Understood? He nodded and suddenly smiled. Just a little, but it was a genuine smile. Not a mask, not forced tension, a child's smile when things felt easier. Sunday dragged on, slow and heavy like dough that refuses to rise. I busied myself with ordinary tasks to keep my hands occupied, laundry, cleaning, making lunch. But inside, a clock was ticking incessantly. Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev called twice, briefly on business. Are you still available Sunday around 8 in the evening? Yes, I answered. We'll be there in advance. The main thing is to remain calm. Towards the evening, 2 plainclothes officers arrived. They surveyed the house, noting the best positions where Matvey should be. Marat stayed with him in his room, so the child wouldn't accidentally be in the way when the door opened. Before going to his room, Matvey came up to me and took my hand. Grandma, you won't give me away, will you? To no one, I said. As long as I'm alive. To no one. He squeezed my fingers tightly like an adult and left. I remained in the living room. The house was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet, taut like a violin string. I could hear one of the officers shift his weight, the creak of a floorboard in the hallway, the rushing of blood in my own ears. The clock showed 58 minutes to the hour. At that moment, headlights flashed outside. A car stopped at the gate. I stood up as if someone had lifted me by the shoulders. My heart pounded so hard I feared they could hear it through the door. Footsteps sounded on the porch, a key in the lock, a click. And I had only one thought. They're about to walk in, confident everything is already settled, and they have no idea that a completely different ending awaits them in this house. The key turned in the lock, a familiar sound, as if nothing in this house had ever changed. The lock clicked. The door opened. "Mom, we're here," Roman shouted from the threshold, not yet seeing that the living room wasn't empty. Daria followed, laughing, bags and packages in her hands. "So, how are you two doing?" "Matvey wasn't causing any trouble," she said lightly, as if she'd just returned from a short trip, not left me a cake for today. I stood by the wall. Next to me were Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev and 3 other officers, quiet, composed in their civilian clothes. The room fell silent for a second, so quiet I heard Daria inhale sharply. Roman froze. The bag in his hand dropped as if it had become heavy. "What is all this?" he asked, attempting a smile. But the smile didn't materialize. Daria recovered first. She placed a hand on her chest, her eyes widening. "Roman, is that the police? What happened? Mom Rosa, what have you done?" Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev stepped forward precisely half a pace. His voice was calm, without a hint of shouting. That made it even more terrifying. "Roman Evgenievich Melnikov and Daria Sergeyevna Melnikova, you are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder, fraud, and child abuse." Daria let out a short, sharp laugh, as if she'd been pricked. "Are you insane? What murder? This is some kind of mistake." Roman looked at me, not at the police, at me, and in his gaze was not surprise, but a mixture of anger and fear. "Mom, what did you do?" he managed to choke out. "Why did you call them?" I inhaled slowly. I was surprised myself at how even my voice sounded. "I did what I had to do, Roma. I told the truth." Daria immediately went on the offensive, as she knew how, straight to the point, as usual. "She's not well," she said, turning to the lieutenant colonel. "It's her age, her blood pressure. She's imagining things. She thinks she can add something herself to frame us." Roman picked up the cue, as if they had rehearsed this beforehand. "Yes, officer," he stumbled, unsure of the correct address. "Ask the doctors. She has episodes. She gets worked up." I looked at him and suddenly realized he hoped, right up to the last moment, that I would remain the mother who forgave everything, that I would get scared now, start making excuses, burst into tears and say, "All right, go ahead, just don't disgrace the family." I didn't cry. "Roma," I said quietly. "You yourself said last night that everything should look natural. Do you remember?" He flinched as if struck. Daria turned to me sharply. "Were you eavesdropping?" she hissed. "Were you standing outside the door?" "I was," I replied, "and I heard everything. I raised my hand and showed my phone, and I also saw your messages, the ones where you discussed dosages, where you looked up how to do it little by little so no one would suspect." Daria paled, but immediately put on a victim's face. She's lying. She's lying about everything. Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev nodded to one of the officers. He took out a folder and a bag of evidence. "We have the correspondence," Grigoriev said calmly. "We have the poison packaging, traces of toxins from the analyses, and we have a food product prepared for consumption." I said it more simply, in plain language, because I needed them to understand that I wouldn't back down. "The cake, Daria. That big piece. Mom Rosa, remember?" Daria snapped. "I hope you choke on that cake," she yelled. "How long could we live in your house like it was a commune? You ruined our whole lives." Roman stepped towards her as if to silence her, but it was too late. The words were out. Genuine, unvarnished words. He looked at the police and abruptly changed his tone. He shifted, as he always did. "It's all because of Matvey," he said. "We needed money. Do you understand how much treatment costs? We couldn't manage." I raised my hand, stopping him. "Don't you dare hide behind Matvey," I said. "Don't you dare." Daria choked with anger. "And who are you to judge us?" she shrieked. "All your life you've just interfered. I didn't let her finish. Not with a shout, but with a voice that no longer held that old submissiveness. "Enough." And at that moment, footsteps sounded from the hallway. The door opened slightly, and Marat entered the living room. Matvey was beside him. My Matvey. He walked calmly, without fidgeting, without hiding his eyes. He simply walked in and stopped. Roman froze, as if struck in the chest. Daria looked at her son as if seeing him alive for the first time, not just a convenient picture for payouts. "Matvey," she gasped, "what are you doing? Why are you standing there?" Matvey looked at her, then at Roman, and I saw his chin tremble. But he didn't back down. He took a step forward and said loudly, clearly, so everyone in the room could hear, "Dad, Mom, I've told them everything." Daria opened her mouth, but couldn't utter a sound, and Matvey continued, his gaze unwavering. "I won't be silent anymore." "Dad, Mom, I've told them everything," Matvey said evenly with childish simplicity, and that simplicity made my chest ache more than any shouting. Daria seemed not to grasp what he said at first. She looked at him as if he were a broken object that had suddenly started working on its own. "Matvey," she stammered. What are you saying? You're not—" She faltered because she didn't know what to say. According to her instructions, she couldn't say aloud what she had done for years. She couldn't say, "You were supposed to stay silent." Roman stood rooted to the spot. His eyes darted from Matvey to me, from me to the police. He was clearly still trying to find a way out, a loophole. Matvey stepped forward. He was trembling slightly, but his voice didn't break. "I'm not sick," he said. "I can talk, I can read, I can write. And you said I should pretend I couldn't so you'd get money and could live here." Daria jerked towards him as if to grab him, to shut his mouth, to revert everything back to how it was. Marat instantly stepped between them. "Don't approach the child," he said calmly, but in a way that made Daria stop. Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev nodded to the officers, and they were already taking out handcuffs. Daria erupted into a shriek. "It's all her!" She pointed her finger at me. "This old witch made it all up. She turned the child against us. She hates me. She wants to take Matvey for herself." Roman tried to speak gently, as he used to with me when he wanted me to give in. "Mom," he exhaled, "but you understand. We didn't want to. We just got confused. I'm weak. I'm to blame. But that's no reason to destroy everything." I looked at him and suddenly understood. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for his convenient mother back, the one who would swallow anything for the sake of family. And I was no longer that woman. "Roma," I said softly, "last night you called me pathetic and old. Remember? You discussed my death like you were buying a refrigerator, and now you stand here and say, 'We got confused.' You didn't get confused. You made a choice." He flinched, his face contorted. Daria abruptly stopped shrieking and said in a terrifying, angry whisper that could be heard by everyone, "If you had died on time, none of this would have happened. Why are you even still alive?" It was then that I felt no fear. I felt clarity. Clarity as it only comes after betrayal, when a person finally shows their true colors, and you no longer waste energy on illusions. Lieutenant Colonel Grigoriev stated calmly, "Daria Sergeyevna, Roman Evgenievich, you are under arrest. You will now go to the station. Everything else will proceed within the investigation." They were handcuffed. Daria tried to struggle, shouting that it was a mistake, that she was a mother, that they were taking her child away. Roman remained silent. Only his lips trembled, and he looked at me a couple of times as if I were obliged to save him. But I didn't move. When the door closed behind them and their footsteps faded, The house became so quiet it was as if the walls had finally exhaled after a long time. Matvey stood beside me, holding onto my sleeve. A thin thread, but firm. "Grandma, they won't come back, will they?" he asked. I didn't say never. "I knew life," I said. "Not today, and after that there will be a trial. But you're with me, and that's what matters." That night I slept very little, but it was a different kind of insomnia, not from fear, but because my mind couldn't keep up with reality. It was as if I had lived someone else's life and suddenly returned to my own, only it was different now. After that, everything proceeded heavily and mundanely, as it usually does in real life. The investigator summoned me for questioning. I brought documents, showed the correspondence, explained where and what I had found. The doctors confirmed the analyses. There were indeed traces of toxins in my blood, and if I had continued to drink and eat what they were giving me, I wouldn't have lasted long. Matvey was examined by specialists, and they officially stated what I had already seen with my own eyes. He has no severe autism. There are consequences of fear and abuse. There's a habit of silence, because that's how he survived. There's trauma. He was prescribed sessions, a psychologist, and a calm regimen. Daria and Roman were tried. I won't describe it beautifully, like in a movie, because there's nothing beautiful in courts. There are papers, expert reports, protocols, and tired faces. But their guilt was proven. Attempted poisoning, fraud with payments, child abuse, document forgery. They were imprisoned, given real sentences, not suspended. They didn't get away with it, but as it should be. I sat in the courtroom and looked at Roman, at my son, and felt nothing warm. That's also a truth of life. Love isn't elastic. It can be trampled so badly that only the memory of its existence remains. After the trial, I took custody of Matvey. No relatives appeared. Daria's sisters suddenly became unavailable. Roman's distant relatives also disappeared. As soon as it became clear that the house and money were also mine, they all became busy with their own affairs. I didn't even need to explain it. I've seen such things many times. I just didn't want to believe before that it would happen to me, too. I sold the house in Podolsk. I couldn't live there, not because of bad energy, but because every corner there was about my humiliation, about how I tiptoed around my own house, about how I thanked them for tea that could have killed me. Matvey and I moved to a 2-room apartment in Moscow in Sokolniki, near the park. Not a palace, a regular apartment, but bright. And most importantly, it had a sense of being our place, where no one dictated when I could turn on the TV or what I should eat. I sold the plot of land in Crimea and put most of the money into a separate account, solely for Matvey. School, lessons, treatment, if needed, and just for living. I didn't touch the insurance all at once. I did it wisely, part for a safety net, part for custody and lawyers, so no one would start asserting their rights later. And then the most difficult part began. Not the trial, not the paperwork, but simple daily life. For a while, Matvey flinched at loud voices. If someone argued on the street, he would grab my hand. At night, he might wake up and check if the door was locked. Sometimes he would remain silent for entire days, not because he couldn't, but because he was afraid of punishment for his words. I didn't pressure him. I was just there, making breakfast, taking him to school, picking him up, sitting next to him when he drew, talking to him calmly, like to a normal child, not like to a special one who needed endless pity. After a few months, his shoulders relaxed, he started laughing, and sometimes he would tell me himself about his day at school. He made a friend, Sasha, a boy from the neighborhood. They played in the yard, argued, made up like all children. And every time Matvey would run home shouting, "Grandma, look, something chewed inside me." One day, I received a letter from Roman from prison. He wrote that he had realized he loved me, that it wasn't his fault, it was Daria. He asked for forgiveness and to see his son. I read it once and threw it away. Not out of spite, but because I honestly understood I don't have to pretend nothing happened. Forgiveness is not an obligation. Sometimes no is the only way to remain alive inside. Daria also wrote, "There was no repentance, only anger and blame. You ruined our lives." I kept that letter in a folder with documents, not to reread it, but to remember. There are people who didn't just dislike you, they simply wanted your house and your death. Now I'm 70. I haven't gotten younger or more naive. I've become calmer. I don't have a big family where everyone gathers joyfully at the table. No, I have myself, and I have Matvey, and that turned out to be enough. In the evenings, when he does his homework, I sit nearby with tea, real tea, without worry and without fear. Sometimes I look out the window and think about how easily I could have disappeared quietly for natural reasons, and how easily they would have stood at my wake, feigning sorrow, and then sold the house and left as they dreamed. And then I understand a simple thing, without beautiful words. If someone wants to use you, they will call it love. If they want to break you, they will call it care. And if they want your money, they will say it's for the child. I learned too late not to believe words, but it's not too late to learn to believe myself. And I also realized blood is no guarantee. A son can become a stranger, and a grandson whom everyone wrote off can turn out to be the only one who saves you. Matvey sometimes asks about his parents. Not often, but he asks. I answer honestly, without dirt, without curses. They did bad things. For bad things, one has to pay. He nods and doesn't ask any more questions. He's had enough that he's safe now, and I'm content that every morning I wake up and know, this day is mine. I'm not being poisoned. I'm not being pushed out. I'm not living in a shadow. I'm living simply and quietly with dignity. And if after my story you take away even one thought, let it be this. Don't wait until it's too bad. If someone is slowly killing you with words, fear, or care, they are not family and not love. They are strangers under your roof. I understood this late, but I managed. And Matvey managed, which means it wasn't all in vain.